Hello everyone and welcome to my 100th video on this YouTube channel. It's actually amazing how time flies by. I can't really believe it that after just a few months I'm to this point where I do my 100th video on this YouTube channel. I'm in a bit of a different position of my house right now. I'm in the place where I have my speakers over here, and here you can see that I have the Audio-Technica LP120, which is the one I put and I listen to my vinyl records that I own, and I also have a mixer over here where this whole thing is getting processed with, along with a CD/DVD player which is a bit down here. So if you haven't seen in some of my previous videos, I actually love collecting vinyl records and also CDs. I always had a passion on collecting stuff, and I actually do listen to the records I own. I don't just have them for decoration. And yeah, it's been a few years since I started collecting CDs. And more recently, I just updated my vinyl setup. I just took a better turntable than the one I had previously, and I ended up spending a lot of money on records. And it's been for probably like 2 or 3 years, no, actually probably like 2.5 years since I started collecting records, and I'm already to this point where I own 164 records. All those albums I own are obviously albums that I actually love, especially when it comes to vinyl records. I've never done an impulse buy, and personally I'm sort of avoiding some second-hand stuff or some albums that are heavily used or that there's some really old pressings. I don't have an issue if it's a repress or if it's a first pressing or anything like that. I just want an album that it would just sound good. So I decided for my 100th video to do something special and start something that I was thinking about doing it since the first day I created this channel, and that is to show my vinyl collection. And I think that this is the most appropriate time for that. I have lots of records. I think it's a good time to just start this sort of videos. I'll create a new playlist where you can see all my vinyl collection, and I'm also going to do a CD collection because I also own a lot of CDs that some of them are really interesting and intriguing to see, in my opinion. And who knows, maybe in one of these releases you also might find something to your liking. And if you end up discovering and enjoying an album because of me, because you happen to see this video or in another video that I'm going to do in the future, that would be something that I would be really pleased with, and it would make me really happy. So with all that being said, I'm not just going to show all the records that I own in just one video. I'm going to probably go into this like showing 5 or 6 records each time, because I want to say a few stuff about each one of the albums, because in my opinion each record I own has a specific story behind it, and I don't want to just show the album and just move on into the next. I want to just spend a few time with each record and explain why it's part of my collection, why it's that important to me. One last thing, the orders of the albums might kind of trigger or shock you, but the one style of ordering that helps me the most is not actually neither genre wise or alphabetical order. It's actually chronological. So all of these albums you're going to see right now are in chronological order, from the very first albums I got up until the very last, and then we've gone over the videos where I show everything that I have up until this point in my collection. Then there are going to be some vinyl updates in some of the later stuff I'm going to grab in the future. So without further ado, let's get into our very first record. This is the very first album that I bought, and it's the self-titled Odos 55. This right here is the second album of the band, which is also self-titled like with their first one, but just in order not to get confused, their second one on 2016 has a completely black font, while their very first on 2012 is on a white font, and it also says Odos 55. When it comes to some Greek records, this is easily one of my favorite Greek records of this decade. Now I love that this album in particular has the track listing and all the information about this album on just this insert right here, because when you get to the entire album it's just black. There is nothing to it, there is no information to this album whatsoever, and you just have your album over here which is from the label IRKT, which is a label that has some great represses of some Greek old school stuff from the 80s in some new age post-punk and dark wave stuff of Greece. The album itself is a regular black record, and this album in particular does not have a CD version. None of their albums ever got pressed into CDs. IRKT is only known for making vinyl records. It's not that much of a great press, but we're still talking about an album that is strictly numbered to only 500 copies, and the main reason I bought it is that because it was going to sell out like really quickly. And there's this record store where I happened to buy pretty much half of the records that I own, and he was telling me that the album was going to about be sold out, and so I decided to get it, even if my setup was not that proper at this point. And now, truth be told, the album is a bit more expensive, like it goes for about, not something that crazy, but now in Discogs I think that it goes for up to 30 euros at some occasions, and consider that I bought it for just like 17 or 18 euros. Yeah, I'm really glad that I got it as I had the time. But yeah, this is an album that I highly suggest you to listen to it nonetheless. You can find it on YouTube, you can find it on IRKT's Bandcamp, and even if the lyrics are on Greek, if you don't have that much of an issue with it, the music on this thing is still amazing. We're talking about possibly one of the most experimental dark wave stuff that I've ever heard. Combining it with some heavy field recordings and noise, there is a really dark and ominous atmosphere in all of the synths, in all of those recordings. It sounds really lo-fi, the vocals are full of reverb, there is a depressing aura in this album, and it just sounds really good. Highly suggest you to go and listen to this album, especially when it comes to some underground Greek stuff. Definitely go and give this one a listen, especially if you're a fan of some more underground and experimental dark wave stuff. This is possibly the best thing you can find. The very next record in my collection is LEBANON HANOVER's Tom 42. This is also made from a Greek label that I really love, Fabrika Records, and you might be familiar from Fabrika Records from acts like LEBANON HANOVER, Cellophane, and She Passed Away. Now this album in particular has to be one of my favorite releases of dark wave stuff from this decade. It's really sad, it's really melancholic, and easily some of their best tracks land in this album, like Sadness is Rebellion, like Gallo Dance is easily one of the most well-known tracks of this decade when it comes to just really melancholic dark wave stuff and post-punk. And also there are so many other great songs, I Believe You Can Survive. It's a really short album, really great from start to finish. I also love the insert of this thing having all of the lyrics. And the album is kind of heavy, and this is the very first time I saw myself having a colored record. And it might not be the most prime example of a colored record because it goes, you know, to the shades of black and grey, but still it was a really good and pleasant surprise for me. I love that this is my very first colored record. Back in the day I wouldn't even believe that stuff like this actually existed. I didn't know that colored records was a thing, and when I got my hands into one, yeah, I was really excited about it. I think that at this point there are not that much to say about LEBANON HANOVER other than that this is easily their best album in my opinion. There are so many great tracks in this one in particular, and if you're a fan of just, you know, straight up post-punk and dark wave stuff, you ought to give this one a listen if you haven't already. It's definitely one of the better ones you can find from this decade. The next one is the very first 10-inch that I own, and this is a split from MAURIZIO, BIANCHI and Merzbow. This is actually one of my few sort of impulse buys on vinyl, because I didn't really hear the entire thing. I just saw a video of YouTube which was from this label where they have a trailer having some snippets from each one of the songs, and I was just blown away so much to the snippets of this thing that I was like, I'm going to go and get this album. And I bought it the same day with LEBANON HANOVER. This is a really limited copy going for only 270 copies, and there are two very old tracks from Merzbow and MAURIZIO Bianchi going from back in 1982. And this Merzbow work in particular is easily one of my favorites. It has the element that I like most about this era of music from Merzbow, which was tape loops. There were some albums from Merzbow back in the day where he did this tape loop thing, and in my opinion it makes for some of his very best works. And this particular track is not an exception. I think this is an amazing example of tape loop noise song. The packaging of this thing is a bit weird. Like, you have this whole plastic thing. These are actual photographs. Like you can sense it over here. They have just glued two photographs in this and that side. And then you open this and it opens like this. This is just an empty thing, and there you have your record, which none of the sides is actually labels, so you don't really know which side is which. It's up to you to understand which side is which. And you know, that's a bit of a fun thing. It's one of the appeals in the underground scene that it always tries to be questionable and mysterious, and I'm fine with that. I like stuff like this. And yeah, what I can say about this 10-inch is that it's possibly one of the best albums, one of the best things that I own, that I have in my collection, because both of these songs are really amazing, especially though the one from Merzbow. I love this song in particular. Each side is going for about 10 minutes long. You know what to expect just from hearing the snippets of YouTube, but anyways, amazing 10-inch. But this one right here is probably one of the most important and one of my favorite albums in my entire collection, and that is Lowest Music 2 by Merzbow. Now, this album in particular has to be possibly one of my favorite works from Merzbow, if not his best. Now, a few minutes back I talked about how much I love the tape loop stuff from Merzbow, and this album is the most prime example of that. If you are unaware of this release, this was also released at the Merzbox CD collection, and it was the album called Nil Vagina Tape Loops. It's been a while since I've heard the entire Merzbox on YouTube. I decided to just give all of the albums a listen, and Nil Vagina Loops was one of those albums that blew me away. Some of the tracks are actually works that were taken back from a cassette of Merzbow that was released back in 1982, which is something mind-blowing for me to think that Merzbow was doing something as experimental and as obscure as this in just the 80s. I was like, who got that cassette? And it's really surprising to me that Urasima, this Italian label, out of all the releases, they decided to repress this on vinyl 34 years after the release of Lowest Music 2 on cassette. It's been 34 years, but here it is. This is a limited edition of 199 copies. That's a very few, let me tell you that. And I'm just so happy to own this. This is easily one of the most obscure and one of the weirdest albums I've heard in my life. Now, if you're a fan of Merzbow, I don't know if I can certainly recommend this album in particular to you. Don't expect some really harsh noise stuff like Pulse Demon or Venereology or 9030. This is just out there experimental loop music. I like this insert over here that they included, and this has to be my favorite type of sleeve for vinyl. It's a combination of paper and plastic, and it's just so easy for the album to just get out without any problems and without leaving that much of a dust or having the paper making scratches on the album when you put it out. And let me tell you this is a great pressing. The sound of this thing is really good. Whether you're a fan of Merzbow or not, if you're just looking for something extremely weird and obscure and out there, this is one of the best recommendations I can give you. Yeah, this album is just weird. Just go to YouTube, search for Nil Vagina Tape Loops, and just go and listen to the second and the third track that are actually the ones that land in this specific album, or just go listen to the entire thing and just let your mind get confused. And the final record I'm gonna show you for today is this collab of FAUST and Nurse with Wound. If you are familiar with the sound of Nurse with Wound and FAUST, you're going to expect something really obscure, and that's what you're gonna get with this album. This is an extremely good collab between the weirdest legends of krautrock and Steven Stapleton being one of the most creative, abstract and avant-garde producers of our times. This collab is possibly one of the most expensive albums I own in my collection. Not something all that much, it's a double record, and I think I got it for 30 euros, which to itself, yeah, it's a bit much, but you know, it could be for something as obscure and as experimental as this, you might expect something a bit more. This is a double album, and the second one has actually bonus material, which I haven't heard of the bonus material when I bought this album. I only heard the very first one, which is the 4 tracks of Disconnected. 4 really weird and really abstract pieces combining krautrock, abstract music, concrete, avant-garde music. It's just a mess of an album, but it's so well executed. And this is also a colored pressing. This first album comes in this transparent yellow, which it looks really awesome, it looks really cool. It kinda seems like lime or a straight shade of green if you put it on the turntable. But what I also like is that the second album actually comes in a different color. It comes in this transparent orange and it looks gorgeous. I also like the labels on these things. They look really abstract, experimental, and they fit really well with the whole aesthetic of the album, and even with the music in some ways. Now, even the bonus material, even if they're not up to par with the collaborations between Nurse with Wound and FAUST, you know, you have the side 3 that has 3 FAUST songs, and then the last one, the side 4, has only 1 song from Nurse with Wound, and it's only 8 minutes long. So yeah, we're talking about a very short 4th side. But with all that being said, this is a great album. It's not one of the most well-known works from both FAUST and Nurse with Wound catalog, and I would say that this is an underrated release. And more people should go and check this one out, especially if you are fans of both of those artists. This is a really solid collaboration done really well, and I'm really happy for having this on vinyl. And with all that being said, these are the 5 first albums in my collection. I definitely started with some of the best things I have in my collection. And yeah, with all that being said, I'm also going to do a video about my CD collection, and after this point, I don't know, I might do this weekly and find a particular day where I will just upload anything from my collection. So that's all for me. Let me know down in the comments if you have heard any of these albums, what do you think of these albums. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.